All right, you're good to go.
I was going to say those little info boxes were your subtle way of telling me, weren't they?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in. We'll call this meeting of our 2025 to 2028 Realignment Committee meeting to order. It is March the 7th at 1:32 p.m. Ms. Lotz, would you mind handling the roll call for us, please?
Okay. Brooke Formaster. Joshua Katz.
Present.
Okay. Miles Baldwin.
Present.
All right. David Big. Okay. Sean Fitzsimons.
He is here. His mute function's going in and out.
Here. Is everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh. Let's see. Ken Parker. Mike Brooks. Okay. Ali Sharoni.
Yes, I'm here.
Let's see. I guess we have Pat Wolfcole.
Here.
Jay Berkeley.
Here.
Dallas Larson.
Present.
Okay. Jason Odegaard.
Present.
Rob Cottrell. Okay. Wade Pearson.
Here.
Paul Sullivan.
Here.
Greg Cole.
Present.
Tammy Habig.
Here.
Lou Marcoussis. Tony Polzian.
Present.
Art Anderson.
Here.
Darvell Bell.
Present.
Freeman Holbrook. Chris Magrum.
Present.
Okay. And I know Ms. Formaster came in late and Marcoussis is here as well. Okay. Mike Kofer.
Here.
Domingo Rivera. Timothy Jackson.
Present.
Bob Levitt.
Here.
Bart Davis.
Here.
I am here. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Okay. Donnie Nelson.
Here.
Okay.
Mr.
That is
Marcoussis
everybody.
Mr. Marcoussis has joined us also, I see.
Present.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Thank you.
Mike Brooks is here also.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I think we're having some, I don't know if you can take a look at this, Ms. Lotz. I'm getting a message or two that we're having some technical difficulties on YouTube as well. So
I'm showing that it is running. So I'm not quite sure.
I'm kind of looking at my end and it's running too. I'll try to take a peek here real quick. I don't want to get too far into this until we can make sure that the public can be watching us.
Bart, if you give me a second, I'll go check in on them.
Thank you. I've got it up as live and I can see myself on it. Yep, I do see it. So we should be good. All right. So I don't know what the problem was that we were getting messages, but it's okay. All right. One of our first things that we need to do here is we need to look at today's agenda. And I do need a motion from somebody on our voting member portion to approve this agenda so that we can actually talk about the things we need to talk about. So our agenda is on pages 1 through 3 of the packet. It was also a very separate attachment that all of you should have received. So we will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Bart?
Yep.
Bart, I make
Yes.
a motion to approve
I make a motion to approve the agenda, but also approve maybe a flexible agenda, so we could also talk about things that are in and out of order.
Mr. Fitzsimons, thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, 485A South, I second.
Mr. Polzian with the second, thank you. Any questions or discussions regarding our agenda? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 The fun of the Zoom meeting, the delay to make sure we get all the ayes in during the ayes. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We have an agenda and we have just cleared our first and only action item for the day. So the rest of it is pretty much just discussion. It'll be a whole lot of me talking. It will be a whole lot of Mr. Anderson, our legal counsel, also when we get to that part.
Mr. Davis,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to let you know real quick that David Vick and Ken Parker have joined the meeting.
Thank you and welcome to everybody. Item number four. Item number 4 on our agenda, comments and announcements coming from the chair. Keep in mind, everybody, this is a big committee. You saw how long it took us to get through the roll call. Eventually, we are breaking into 2 committees when we start to hear the appeals, a 1A, 2A, and a 3A, 4A, 5A. What I do ask of everybody who is here, whether you're a voting member, whether you're a non-voting member, is please keep in mind, we all expect you to represent your school. We all expect you to represent the classification that you're listed in on our roll call. But we need to make sure that all of us here are working for the greater good. This is all about the kids. We want to do the best we can in this alignment. A few of us in this room have been a part of several of these realignment committees and know that there is no perfect solution. If we're here to try to find that, we're going to be spinning our wheels for a long time. We need to try to do the absolute best that we can. This is going to be a lot of work, and we do appreciate the commitment that you're giving us and giving all the student athletes. But it will be a lot of work, and we're going to spend a lot of time together. We're on Zoom, obviously. We're in one of those virtual meetings, and there might be a little bit of a delay at times. Today, especially because we're going through so much information. If you have a question or a comment, if you want to use the raise hand function on Zoom, we'll try to keep an eye on that. But also, don't be afraid to speak over top of me or interject and just say, hey, Bart, real quick. You're not going to offend me. So please, we want to make sure that if you have questions, if you have comments, that they do get heard. We are going to be a little bit more formal, obviously, as we go along, but today, especially with the big group with a lot of questions, don't hesitate to jump in. Okay. Item number 5, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card, or at least a virtual one, and submit it to the NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this meeting. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, or willfully disrupted, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. We do have a couple of public comments. We have one live public comment. I believe Mr. Wakefield is in the room. We'll let him go first today. And Mr. Wakefield, if you would go ahead and unmute, you have 3 minutes, sir, and your time begins now.
Thank you, Realignment Committee. I represent boys basketball coaches from Virgin and Wappa Valley, Boulder City, Elko, and Fernley. The 23-24 overall record for the top 3 private Charter 3A Southern Region teams was 38-0 against all other 3A teams. The average margin of victory for the top 2 was close to 40 points. I appreciate the work that you do to deliberate and regulate student-athlete competition. You guys didn't know what would happen this year, but next year we all have the data before us. The top 2 3A private teams that beat everybody by 40 points will lose 1 senior from their starters. Keeping 3A basketball alignment as is for another year is the NIAA planning to fail on its purpose, I feel. The stated purpose of the NIAA is to ensure that Nevada's student athletes engage in pure competition under uniform regulations. 3A boys basketball lacks uniform regulation and pure competition. The competitive imbalance in 3A boys basketball occurs because private charter schools are not created or regulated in a uniform manner. Let me illustrate. Follow me as the public school 3A team is created. A single 8th grade class matriculates. Those interested in basketball will try out to be selected on the high school team. No lottery system, no multiple middle schools to select from. The team is created from a regulated, geographically bound zone of attendance. If an 8th grader outside the zone of attendance wants to enroll in public school, they must wait 180 days. Simply stated, public school athlete selection is static, regulated, and closed. I don't want to change that. Compare this to the creation of a private or charter 3A basketball team. Any eligible 8th grader from a private or charter school in the greater Las Vegas area can enroll in private 3A high school and be immediately available to play varsity basketball without a 100-day regulation that applies to public school athletes. There's no regulated geographical boundary, no zone of attendance restriction. Some may suggest that private schools use a lottery system to promote fairness. There's no lottery system for public schools. Therefore, it's not uniform. Simply stated, private charter school enrollment is dynamic, less regulated, and open. It's not uniform. It does not lead to pure competition. The competitive imbalance will get worse if the NIAA is idle. I'm urging you to call a special meeting to address this competitive imbalance. My suggestion, place 3A public schools against 3A public schools. Place private charter schools against themselves. This is how you have the NIAA ensure pure competition through uniform regulation. One final consideration. Of the 27 published level 2 appeal summaries from 22 through 24, only 2 determinations involved athletes transferring from private school to private school. Both those occurred in the northern region. The other 25 determinations involved at least one public school. The question needs asking. With all the private charter schools in the South, why don't we see any level 2 appeals from one private school to another?
I apologize, Mr. Wakefield, but that is time. That is 3 minutes.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. We do have another public comment that was submitted by email. I will read this into the record. It is also in your packet on page 5 if you'd like to follow along. It is from Frederick Meyer from Spring Valley High School. Currently in 5A wrestling, the Southern region qualifies 6 kids to the state tournament, and there are 12 teams in the South. In the North, there are 9 teams, and they also qualify 6 kids to the state tournament. This is obviously unfair, as the North qualifies 66% of their wrestlers to the states. The South only qualifies only 50% of their wrestlers to the state tournament. I have a solution. Give the South 7 out of 12 or 7/12. This would be equal to 58% of the Southern wrestlers qualifying. The North would then be given a fair 5 out of 9 or 5/9, which equals 55%. This would be a fair and equitable solution to this issue. Sincerely, Coach Meyer, Spring Valley Wrestling. Do we have any other live public comment from our NIAA office or from any of our other locations statewide here today before we move on?
Mr. Davis, there is nobody in the office.
Thank you, Ms. Lotz. Do we have any public comment anywhere else that we would like to get in right now? I'm going to take that as a no, and we will move on in our agenda to item number 6, which is a welcome to the committee members and an overview of the realignment process. Welcome. I hope you know what you signed up for. It's going to be a road. Some of our people who've been through our realignment committees in the past are aware of how much work goes into this. You will be very popular among the people you represent. They will suddenly pick up the phone to call you and have all sorts of ideas for you, and that's great. This committee was selected because we know we've got a good group of people here. We've got a very vast background. And that's what I want. We want to see a whole bunch of ideas here, but we also, again, as we mentioned before, we want to do what's right for the kids. With the very first thing that we need to discuss, well, 2 things really. One, what we're doing is for fall of 2025. through spring of 2028. This will not have any effect on next season. This committee is tasked with the next realignment cycle. So please do keep that in mind, because these meetings are going to go, we may still be meeting a year from now and beyond. We're not going to have them every week. Trust me, I'm not going to take that much time out of your schedule. But we do want to make sure that we're aware that this is for fall 2025 going through to spring of 2028. And those of you who do the math can realize that's a 3-year cycle. Yes, this next cycle, it has already been approved by our Board of Control, will be for 3 years. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, it gets us back in line with what is in the Nevada Administrative Code. And two, it gets us off of doing realignment at the very same time that the state legislature is meeting. And that takes our staff and our legal counsel away from us for long periods of time. To have those two on top of each other, it was a nightmare the last time. And we want to get back in line with everything. So this next cycle, again, already approved by the board, will be a 3-year cycle. What this committee is being tasked to do is come up with a proposal. Whatever we decide when we decide it isn't necessarily gospel. That proposal is going to go to our Board of Control, and our Board of Control will vote to move this forward. Maybe they might send it back. Maybe they might make some tweaks in it. But we need to make sure that we're aware what we do goes forward to the board. If we all come up with the world's best proposal and send it off, the board still needs to approve it. We do have some liaisons to our board that are in the room with us that are a part of this committee, and they're going to help. Once we get a proposal all set, they'll help explain that to our voting members of our board. But none of those liaisons vote on our board. That was something we wanted to make sure we kept very separate, that we didn't have people making the votes on the realignment committee and then making the same vote at the Board of Control. We wanted to make sure that we had a fresh break there, and we do have that with this committee. What we have also, we've got a lot of freedom here. We've done a lot of work in the past realignment committees to get to the point where we are now, which is 5 classifications. We've run with this for a little bit of time now. The 4A in some cases has been the standalone in the South. We've changed it up a little bit, and the 5A is the standalone in the South in some ways. But when we look back to where we were 15 years ago, Mr. Jackson, if you wouldn't mind being on standby for this one too, you were a large part of this as well back then. We had only a 4A as our highest classification, and we had some very disproportionate leagues in the South. The 3A was down to about 3 schools at that time, and they needed some other schools to play. We created a rubric that created a lot of controversy. And Mr. Jackson, if you, again, you represent the Clark County School District, if you would kind of talk about some of those disparities that we did have when you looked at a Northeast league that really maybe wasn't all that competitive with the Southeast back then, and kind of how we, help me out here with how we got to this point, Mr. Jackson.
Thanks, Bart. I appreciate this time, and welcome everybody to the committee. At the end, you get a ribbon that says, "I survived the realignment committee," so welcome aboard. I'm very happy to be a liaison or a non-voting member to this. Going way back to the very roots of the rubric system, I remember very clearly we were in a room and it was, what are we going to do to save the 3A? Because they were down to 3 schools. It was Boulder City, Moapa Valley, and Virgin, because Faith Lutheran and Pahrump had leveled up with the year enrollment and the double multiplier. The first rubric iteration that we had based the point values in the postseason. And what we had was, we had a disproportionate lean towards one region over the rest. I'll be honest with you, the Northeast region was getting some points that weren't equating out to what was being accumulated in the Southwest and the Northeast, Northwest. So what we had was, you just make the postseason and get points. And we ended up with a situation where schools were having, I don't want to call them unsuccessful, because any season you complete is going to be successful, but they were having less successful seasons than other leagues were, and they were accumulating points, which resulted in them staying into this upper division at that time. And Mr. Nelson, and I can remember the second time we went through this, we even went with the Division II and Division I within that, trying to accommodate that. But we found out geographically aligning our schools was not working correctly. It wasn't causing. And the other problem we had was we were awarding the points in the rubric post-season for the most part. And that was causing a very large discrepancy in the South. So that was probably 2 cycles. And the 3A schools will always remember, and Dallas is going to nod when I say this, that's when they ran into a couple buzzsaws with some large schools. And Sean Fitzsimons is nodding his head, where Clark and Desert Pines, which were very powerful programs during that time period, were in the 3A simply because of where they were geographically, more so than anything else at the time in regards to how they were accumulating points. It was a very difficult time. We had to come back and recreate from the beginning, and that's when Bart began developing the rubric system that we've been using in the last, I would say, what is this, our 4th time, Bart, going through this process with that rubric system. We've tweaked it numerous times. I think Bart's very amenable to that. And I think that that's one of the things we need to look at very carefully this time, is how the rubric is working, whether it's working, whether it needs tweak, or whether it's status quo. The other thing is we should also discuss where we are with 3, 4, and 5A in the South, as well as in the North. I think these are great topics of discussion. And Bart, if I've gone too long, I apologize. And if I didn't hit on something, please fill in the blanks.
Mr. Jackson, I appreciate you gave me a chance to take a breath. I certainly do like that. Let's kind of walk everybody through how we classify right now. Our 1A and our 2A classifications have been done strictly by enrollment. Our 3A schools that fall within the enrollment that is specified in our Nevada Administrative Code, we'll just keep calling it the NAC, but it stands for Nevada Administrative Code. Our 3A schools are also classified by enrollment, but we have other schools that go join them in the 3A on a sport by sport basis based on rubric points. We went to that sport by sport back in 2018, I believe it was, when I came back. Yeah, it's right somewhere around there, 2019. And we've done that for a couple of cycles. So a school may have a team in 3A, team in 4A, team in 5A. Several schools do. Everything from 4A and 5A has been classified by a rubric points, with the exception that in the North, this last cycle, they had 3 schools appeal across the board to join their 3A. And they stayed with that all throughout, with the exception of soccer. So we have a little bit of a, it's called a leeway, the way we classify teams. And we just went through a process with our Board of Control where we changed a lot of things in the Nevada Administrative Code to set where we are right now. And Paul Anderson, our legal counsel, is going to talk about that in a little bit too, and how we go about the NAC. But I will tell you, with this group, I really think we've got a clean canvas. We've got that magic erase board we all remember as kids, where maybe we keep some of it, maybe we keep a lot of it, or maybe we just take the whole thing, lift it up, and start all over again. It's a lot of work to start all over again. Again, to me, the biggest thing we need to do is try to do the absolute best that we can for as many people as we can. But I also don't want to take anything off the table, okay? I do ask that all of you who are here, you're representing a group of some sort, whether it be your school, your classification. In Mr. Jackson's case, his district. In Mr. Levitt's case, he's a 5A Northern Commissioner. He represents 9 schools. Talk to your people, please. We want to involve as many people in this process as we can. Talk to ADs, talk to administrators, talk to principals, talk to your coaches. I don't necessarily want to come back with 100 ideas the next time we look at it, because it's a lot to go through. But we take a look at what we've got right now, and you can see that, and we'll get to it in item number 8. A lot of what is in our timeline policies and procedures from this last go around, that's all in your packet. You can read that. I'm certainly not going to read it to you. You can read that at your leisure and see kind of what we've gone through this last cycle. Maybe we throw things out altogether. I'll talk about a couple of ideas here in a moment, but that's kind of what this committee's tasked with. Is we've got this clean slate. Let's come up with an idea. Let's come up with a proposal. Let's take that forward to our Board of Control. If you have any questions, again, stop me on this, because my background is, I look at this and go, I've done it for a long time. Many people in here have done it for a long time. but we've got some very new people here. And the last thing we want to do is assume people know something that maybe they don't know, what they need to ask more about it. Okay. In the meantime, we're going to go on to item number 7, and that is discussion of the open meeting law and how and why it applies to this committee. And I will ask Mr. Anderson, Mr. Paul Anderson, as we have 2 Mr. Andersons in this meeting. Mr. Paul Anderson is our legal counsel. And I have asked him if he wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to explain the open meeting law, why it applies to us, and what that means for us. So Mr. Paul Anderson, if you're ready, if you want to go ahead and unmute, sir, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Bart. Yeah, I don't want to go into any tremendous detail because the open meeting law is something, that I could talk about and have done in the past with various groups for an hour or two. But I'm just to give you an overview, those of you that are, with public school districts probably have a fairly good understanding of the open meeting law. Those of you that have been on the board of the NIAA as a liaison or a board member, whether you're from a private school or whatever, you probably have a pretty good understanding because you've lived it. But basically, Bart wanted me to talk about why the open meeting law applies to this particular group. And the reason is this. This committee is formed as a result of direction from the NIAA Board of Control, and this committee reports to the NIAA Board of Control. So because the NIAA Board of Control is subject to the open meeting law, this committee is also. And as you can see by looking at your packet, the agenda follows what you would typically see with respect to a board meeting, and that's how these meetings are run. What does that really mean? A couple of things. First of all, before we can hold any meetings, we have to have an agenda that has to be posted, and it has to be posted in certain places. You'll see that right on the packet as to where it has been posted, I think on the cover sheet. It has to be posted 3 business days prior to the meeting. So in this case, it was posted Monday morning prior to 9 o'clock. And that makes this a legitimate meeting. With respect to the open meeting law, the reason you have an agenda is so that you follow it. You can't bring up items or discuss items that are not on the agenda. So that's important to keep in mind. And then probably the most important thing for you as a group, and probably I would assume most of you understand, is outside of this meeting, those of you that will be voting or voting members of the committee, you cannot get together as a group and make decisions on how you're going to vote or the positions you're going to take with respect to a particular item that may be coming down the pike for the next meeting. When we do that, that's a violation of the open meeting law. When you get close to a majority of board members that may be having these meetings outside of an actual public meeting, you cannot do that because all business that's conducted by this group has to be done in the open meeting. It doesn't mean you can't get together and talk. That otherwise, we would never be able to get work done. We'd only be able to do it within the confines of a meeting, which certainly is not enough time to get things accomplished. So don't hesitate to speak with one another and discuss issues that are important to you and your classification, your group, or whatever. But you just can't be saying, hey, this is how we got to go on this particular issue, or deliberate, what we call deliberate to a decision with respect to a particular item that's coming up for a vote. So those are some of the most important things I think to keep in mind. Also, as Bart mentioned earlier, because you're a committee to the NIAA Board of Control, you will take votes, and then those votes will go to the Board of Control. But ultimately, the NIAA Board of Control will approve everything with respect to realignment. Typically in the past, the board is very receptive to what the realignment committee decides, because obviously you're the ones that have done the majority of the work. And you know, the trust is placed in you, as Bart mentioned, you know, liaisons that are on this committee advance a lot of those arguments to the board and explain to them what's taken place with respect to the as far as the realignment committee is concerned. So the work you're doing is very important. But as Bart said, it's not final. And ultimately the board will make those decisions. And so if anyone has any questions with respect to anything dealing with either the open meeting law or anything else from a legal nature, you can feel free to contact me whenever you want. I'll take your call and get back to you as soon as I possibly can, if I can't take it right away. So I don't know if there's any questions, or Bart, if there are any other areas you might want me to cover, but that's kind of just a quick overview.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do we have any questions from our group today about what Mr. Anderson just spoke about regarding the open meeting law and what we can do and can't do?
Yeah, Dallas Larson. So if Jason and I in the 3A South wanted to get all the 3A Southern members and discuss realignment, that wouldn't be an issue for us to talk to the members what their input would be, correct?
Yeah, if you and Jason Odegaard were to get together, that's two of, I don't know how many voting members on this board. That's not close to a majority. And you're talking about your group, and you're talking with your group as to what they want you to bring back to a meeting. So that's not a problem, Dallas.
Okay.
But if you and over half of the voting members here got together and said, this is how we're going to go with respect to this particular issue outside of a meeting, that is a problem. Okay.
Our goal here also is to keep everything as transparent as can be. People are going to have a lot of questions about this entire process as we go through it. The more open we can be with everybody, the better off we're going to be. And obviously under open meeting law, there's a whole lot we have to be open about. And that's not a bad thing. It's not something that should scare you off. Anybody on this committee can call anyone in our office at any time with questions. You can get in touch with me however you'd like with any questions. That's not going to hurt us. As Mr. Anderson said, if 15 of you decided you were going out for chicken wings and deciding what we're going to do months from now, then we've got a problem. But as long as we stay within the confines of the open meeting law, we're going to be fine. We just want to make sure everybody understands it. So any other questions at this point on that? Mr. Anderson, thank you. I'll be coming back to you here shortly.
I think Mr. Jackson had a question.
I did, but it wasn't about open meeting. Paul, the document that we have shared, the document with everyone, has a lot of the stuff that was sent to the LCB. Has it been updated, or is it still with the LCB?
Are you talking about the new regulation?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the other thing Bart wanted me to touch on. You want me to do that now, Bart?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step out, Bart.
No, you're good. Go ahead and let's open up item number 8 right now, which is a discussion about the process, timelines, policies, and procedures. And we'll just go right ahead on into that, Mr. Anderson, if you wouldn't mind talking about those changes and then kind of the process of how we change, the NIAA and its board change items in the Nevada Administrative Code.
Okay. All right. So let me just talk about the regulation is in your packet. It starts at page 27 and I think goes through the end of the packet there through page 39. That is a regulation that just came back from the Legislative Council Bureau. It's been approved. It was just approved a week and a half ago and signed into law. So this revises 385B.250 through 385B.254, which were the regulations dealing with realignment prior to the development of this particular regulation. If you look at that, you're going to see a whole bunch of bold type lining, through different things and whatnot. If you're familiar with a red line document and how you redline a document, I'm sure probably most of you have done that. That's all that really is. So the line through or deletions, the bold type or additions, you know, and you can follow the new language just by reading through it that way. At some point, this will finally come on to the website and it'll be in a clean format. But what this does and has finally done, and I think I mentioned at the NIAA conference a week and a half ago or so when I was giving my presentation there, is this brings the NIAA into compliance with the realignment process that we have been following for the last 2 or 3 cycles, where we went to a 2-year realignment. It's very well written, and it adopted everything that the Board of Control wanted to see and that the realignment committee was pretty much following, like I say, for the last 2 or 3 alignments. It also adds language concerning requirements of what schools have to have in terms of teams. 1 boys team, 1 girls team at the varsity level, with respect to fall, winter, and spring sports, you know, in order to be a part of a league in a region and whatnot. So if you take your time and go through that, this is the law that is going to govern this committee. Bart wanted me to talk to you about the process that we go through at the NIAA level to revise regulations. This particular regulation, so you know, we started the revisions to this when Bart Thompson was the executive director, about halfway through his term. He and I began this, and the LCB, the Legislative Counsel Bureau, they're the ones who actually write the rules. We got to get approval through them and then ultimately through the legislature to get these passed. They were not real receptive to how we had changed this, but ultimately we got it done. So this particular regulation took a number of years to bring into compliance. That's normally not the case when we go to revise a regulation, but when it usually takes about a year for the NIAA board to revise any regulation. And the reason for that is if an issue comes, if there's a regulation that's the board is considering reviewing, changing, or adding, or deleting, or whatever, that has to come to the board at an initial meeting. It's looked at there, it's discussed there, and it's determined whether to go forward or not with changing the regulation. If it's approved to do that, I take it after the meeting, get it down to the Legislative Counsel Bureau, and they turn it into what I call Legislative Counsel legalese. They write in a very different way than you and I would, as you can see just by reading the regulation. But they have to put it into their language, and then they send it back to me as counsel, and I get it back on the next agenda for the board to consider. If what the LCB's done falls in line with what the Board of Control wants to see, it's voted on at that next meeting, comes back again to the LCB as being approved by the NIAA, and then it ultimately goes to what we call what's called the Legislative Commission, which is a group of senators and assembly persons that meet periodically to review final regulations and to give them either the approval or denial going forward. This one just went to the Legislative Commission, like I say, a week and a half ago. It was approved. Then the Secretary of State just signed it into law a few days ago. And so now this is the law. It may not appear on the books right away, but this is the law that we're following. So the point is, it takes a long time. If this committee wants to come up with a bunch of revisions to this regulation and how we realign, I wouldn't recommend it, because one, I think this regulation that we have in place, like I say, is a result of a lot of work and a long period of time, and to revise it is going to take at least over a year to do. And I don't think it would be looked on real favorably by the Legislative Council Bureau if, we just have it approved and we're coming back with new ideas now of how we might want to revise this. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that process, but if you do, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. That being said, though, too, we still have the room, the flexibility within what we see in our packet and what has gone through to now be signed into law by the Secretary of State, where we've got a little flexibility there too. If we want to make some tweaks to it, there's some room still there. Yes, sir?
There definitely are. And, probably the best example of, room to interpret a reg and whatnot is just with respect to the old regulation having been in place for 2 or 3 realignment cycles. And we were basically following what we now have finally written into the law. So, yeah, and in this particular one, they've left some of the issues, that we're going to have to deal with from time to time pretty wide open, which is good, because it does give some flexibility to the realignment committee.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Anderson at this point? Okay. Let's talk about some other parts of our timeline policies and procedures. If you look at your packet on pages 6 all the way through page 25, that's the timeline policies and procedures that our last realignment committee, the one who came together and put together the alignment that we're working with right now, that's what they came up with. And you see within that timeline policies and procedures, we have little guidelines for when we needed to meet, when we needed to have things done. Within the policies and procedures, you will see how we were classifying schools and or teams. You will see the different parts of the rubric and how that all comes into play, how it works. Again, I'm not going to go through 20 pages with you. You guys are all very intelligent people, probably all much smarter than I will ever be. And you can read that on your own and let me know if you have questions during that. We as a group, pretty early in our timeline of meetings, we will need to come up with a document very similar to that. It could be the very same one with some little tweaks to update. It could be slightly different. We would like to get that passed forward to our board as well, so that they know this is what we're operating under. They will hopefully approve that pretty early in the process. And then the back half of the process, where we actually start to put schools and teams into classifications, into leagues, and then we hear possible appeals from schools about where they are, that becomes a little bit easier once we have everything in place, timeline policies and procedures wise. Mr. Anderson talked a little bit about how we changed the NIAA. And if you look at page 26 in your packet that follows all 20 pages of that TPP, one of the examples I'll give you is where we have in the NIAA, and I'm going to pull this up on my packet, so give me just a second here to get to that page itself. So I'm quoting the right information. That's NAC 385B630 and NAC 385B632. And that talks about the number of teams needed in 1A in each of those items to hold a state tournament. Maybe that's something we look at in a certain classification. It's been 9, and it's been 9 for a long time, that we have to have 9 in a classification to have a state tournament. Depending on how we see things, maybe we take a closer look at that and change that number a little bit. When we look at a 5A that's been a standalone in the South, do we think that schools 1 through 14 are all competitive with each other? Or do we look at the possibility of having maybe 8 teams form a state tournament? Not suggesting we necessarily do that, just saying it's a possibility. But again, as Mr. Anderson said, if that's something we want to do, that's something we need to think about pretty early in the process, because we need to make sure that our board is on board with that, and that we could start the process of changing the NIAA through our board. We already talked about on pages 27 through 39 in your packet, Mr. Anderson detailed all the different changes that we made after this last cycle and how long that took us to get everything through the Legislative Council Bureau. It's a lot. Everything we're throwing at you today, guys, and I do apologize because this is like going back to college and having your professor throw a whole bunch of information at you on the first day and expecting you to know everything. But all of that information's in there. And I do ask that for your homework, part of your homework, this committee kind of read through that when you have time. You've all got other jobs. We understand that. We don't want you to make this your first priority, but please read through that. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to come to me, to any member of our staff. If you have questions on the legal end of things, as Mr. Anderson said, please don't hesitate to reach out to him. We have members of this committee who've been members of previous committees. Please talk with them as well in the one-on-one and say, okay, how did we do this? Why did we do this? So that you get a good understanding of everything. As Mr. Anderson suggested, with how long this has gone on, there are some people, Mr. Anderson, I'm not going to say whether I am or not, who've gone through a lot of this process. Mr. Nelson in our office has, Ms. Lotz has. It's been a lot of work, and to throw it all out and start all over again maybe isn't the best path. But again, we're tasked with trying to do what's best for as many people as we can and for our kids. So we need to look at some different avenues. The other thing I want to tell you and ask you humbly of this group is that you do, as we mentioned before, talk with the other people in the areas that you represent. Mr. Larson, you brought this up. If you and Mr. Odegaard wanted to talk to the other 3A South people, I can't tell you how much I strongly encourage that, so that you're getting a real feel for what everybody around the state wants. We have 123 member schools in the NIAA. Short of having 123 classifications in every sport to hand out a championship to everybody, I don't think we're going to please everyone. We're not going to find a perfect solution to this, but involve the people who you're representing. Talk to them and see what it is that they might think is a good idea for how we align. Maybe you're going to go back to all these people and they're going to say, we love the way we're doing it now. I wouldn't bet on that being a unanimous response, but maybe it could be. We've tried, as we've gone along through this process, as Mr. Jackson said, starting back in the late 2000s, when we had that original rubric that Mr. Wilson and Mr. Petrie had come up with, we've made a lot of tweaks over the course of what is now, I believe, 16 years. We can make more if we see the need to. If everybody's good with rolling for 3 more years on what we're doing right now, heck, everybody's job became a whole lot easier. I'm not here for the easy. I hope everybody else isn't here for the easy either. We've got some work to do. We need to make this the best that we can. But please, when we come back and meet again in a couple of weeks, come back with some ideas. Mr. Fitzsimons, for instance, in the 2A, talk to your group and say, hey, are we good with going by enrollment for the way we classify our schools in the 2A? Or do we look at the 2A in the South, which is kind of shrunk in terms of number of football playing schools, for instance, and say, we're down some here. We might need to make some changes. Ms. Formaster at Pahranagat Valley, Mr. Vick at Smith Valley, talk to your 1A people and say, are we good with what we're doing enrollment-wise? Or do we want to make some changes? Do we want to try to change that enrollment number a little bit between the 1A and 2A? There's a lot of options here on the table. And again, I'm not advocating change for the sake of change. I'm not advocating anything from my position. It's the members of this committee who will form what our proposal is that we take forward to the board. Everybody in here is going to have skin in this game. Our 3A people, both in the North and the South, do you want to stay in a position where those 3A schools, like a Moapa Valley that Mr. Larson represents, are still classified to stay in 3A by enrollment? Or do we open it up where there's a possible rubric tie-in there, and those schools are also subject to the rubric? There are as many ideas in here as there are people in here. I mean, we could go with what we're doing now and stay enrolled 3 more years, we may look at, heck, leagues don't mean anything. Everybody makes the playoffs. We classify by a rubric or we classify by enrollment, but we only use that for postseason. And we have a situation where we have different leagues formed differently so that schools that want to play each other can. What I'm telling you in a very long-winded fashion is we've got the openness to do what we think is best. So let your mind wander on this, but also keep in mind, we do need to follow the Nevada Administrative Code. That is state law. That's not to say we can't make changes along the way if we feel they're necessary and our board of control agrees with us. I'm going to stop right now because I feel like I'm on top of a soapbox, and I'm going to ask, do we have questions from our group here? Stop me at this point if you feel you need to add something to the discussion, or if you've got a question. Please go ahead and unmute and ask.
So I'll ask Dallas Larson. If we do have a new idea or a change we feel might work for the rubric, at what meeting do those come into play? Is it our next meeting? I mean, because that's one where we've had people come to the realignment meeting and say, well, what about this idea? And we're like, this is not the meeting for that. So I just kind of want to make sure, what meeting are we bringing the ideas to the table?
I would like to do that as soon as our next meeting. And I get that that's in 2 weeks and it's a quick turnaround, and we're over spring break for a lot of schools, and it's going to be difficult. But until we have formed a timeline, policies, and procedures and got that forward to our board, we don't have a timeline, policies, and procedures that we're operating under. We'd be open to new ideas. The sooner the better on something like that. I know a lot of people have had ideas in the back of their head for years. Well, you should have done this. You guys should have been doing that. Bring those forward. We're going to have different coaches in different sports that are going to want what football does right now with having multiple championships within that Class 5A. Is that really what's best, or does that devalue a championship? That's something we need to think about as well. But yes, that next meeting, Mr. Larson, I do see that as a real opportunity. If we need to extend beyond that, go another meeting in April before we start getting into spring playoffs and graduations and all that good stuff, we'll do that and bring another meeting back so we make sure we're hearing everybody. I've met with some coaches, it's been months ago now, to get some of their ideas. I just don't want to leave anybody out of the process, and I don't want anybody to come back to this committee or to the board and say, we were never heard. So please do talk to everybody. And yes, when we meet 2 weeks, great time to bring it up. If we need to meet again after that, if you come back in 2 weeks and you say, you know what, I'm sorry, we just haven't had enough time to meet with everybody, then we'll go one more out so that we have those ideas. Any other questions from our group? I'm not that comprehensive, not that clear. Go ahead.
Hey,
Mr.
Bart, I'm the new
Marcoussis.
guy, Lou
Yeah.
Marcoussis, principal, Cane Springs High School out here in North Las Vegas. What the ideas in which that you're looking for, is there some type of formal format? Would you like it drafted in some type of letter format that we present? Because I know there's a lot of ideas. This is always a contentious discussion, as you've stated, illustrated. So I just want to make sure that if we do have something to present, we do it with the whatever process that is necessary for this board.
Thank you, Mr. Marcoussis, for that question. It doesn't really need to be any sort of formal application. I'd love to have it in writing, obviously, because we have some of our group here that's going to be a very visual part of the way they learn, and others that'll pick it up all from hearing it. So if we could get it down on paper, something that we can include and send out to members of the committee as well, that would be wonderful. Yes. If somebody just wants to come and speak on an item, we can do that as well. I want to be as open as possible. Again, we are a formal committee, but we also want to make sure that we're open to any possibility from people. So yeah, in writing would be great. Preferably something we can all understand. I don't want to make fun of our coaches, but some of them put stuff down on paper and they speak in whatever language their sport is, and it doesn't quite get through to everybody. But yeah, please, in writing would be best.
Hey, Bart, Tony in the south,
Yeah.
458 Foothill. Maybe a dumb question here, but for instance, I know at the end of the last realignment committee cycle, we ran into some timeline issues, specifically like with the baseball proposal that was presented. Do we still have access through our records, or do we need to like if that's an idea we wanted to revisit, would we still have that, or is that something we just need to reach out to those coaches and try to find again?
I think it would be better, one, to reach out to those coaches just to make sure that that's the proposal they still want to do to begin with, because some of them may have gone through, this spring and decided they wanted something different. I believe, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Lotz because she's here and can speak all by herself on that one. I don't know if she's still got some of those proposals and where they'd be. They may be part of packets too that we have in the past. Ms. Lotz, do you want to handle that one?
Yeah, they would be in the packets from the last meeting. If they were given to us verbally, we won't have it, but if it was in writing, we will have it.
That's fine. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions from our group? Again, I know it's a lot to digest in a very short period of time, and for those of you who want to go back through some of this, obviously the meeting will be on our YouTube channel. We do apologize. Apparently there was a wrong link on top of the agenda. Something got screwed up there, but hopefully everybody got to our YouTube channel, which if you go to YouTube and search for NIAA, you're going to find it pretty quickly. You may want to go back and kind of rewatch some of that. But again, don't hesitate to contact our office, to contact me. I'll answer as much as I can for you at any time. If we don't have any other questions about what we've kind of expanded here as a timeline, policies, and procedures item on our agenda, then we're going to move on to the next item, because I don't want to keep you too terribly long either today. And that next item is item number 9, committee members' comments for the good of the order. Again, we'll open it up to anything. I don't know if any of our, let's call them, more grizzled veterans on realignment committees want to talk to our group here about any part of the process as they've been through it, what to expect from the people who might contact you. Now would be a good time to do that, or any other comments you think will help us out here going forward. Go ahead and speak up if you'd like.
Hey, Bart.
Mr. Fitzsimons.
Yeah. Hey, I was just wanted to put it out there. You kind of hit it on the nail when you said it isn't easy. Sometimes it's tough, but I wanted to let the committee know that sometimes it might be best practices to sometimes have kind of 2 or 3 different options, maybe. I mean, certainly I don't want 100 different options, but when we take them to the board, maybe have a couple options that the board can look at. Just a suggestion of someone who's been on these committees before, that sometimes, it's okay to have more than one option when we're looking at reclassification of leagues and that, just so we can have other options to present to the board, so it's not just a one and done thing. And like I said, I'd like to welcome everybody. Some people know me on the board, and some of you I do know, and looking forward to meeting the others. But it is a process, but if we work together, it can be fun at times.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimons. He is one of our liaisons to the board as well. So Mr. Fitzsimons will be in these discussions on both ends, both here in the committee and with our Board of Control. Anybody else for the good of the order today? It might be information overload too. We may have given you too much in too short of a period of time.
Some of us, Bart, we just don't talk very much, so we're just on the quiet side. So for me, it's really cool to be back and be a part of the process after a long hiatus from anything to do with the athletics world. And so I'm looking forward to being part of this process. I was part of some of the original talks way back when as an assistant principal here at Mojave High School when this was all getting started. Was actually a 3A league president way back when Cliff stopped being from Virgin back then. So it's pretty cool to be back part of this and be back in this world. So I appreciate you guys having me back and being a part of this. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. We appreciate that. And one thing I kind of held off on when I said about the selection of this committee, whether or not you guys choose to believe it, everybody on this committee, I went through and talked to a couple of our other staff members, and you guys were all handpicked because we wanted you here. We wanted you to be a part of this process because these are all people we know are going to come with great ideas, and you're going to do what's best, not just for the kids in your school, but for the kids all around the state. And we know you'll take that time and really consider doing everything that we can to get this alignment. We're never going to get perfect. If you come in here thinking we're going to get perfect, you've set the bar too high. But to get it as close as we can to perfect, where it works for as many people as possible, that's what we're here for. I will tell you that I've been out to games every day this week just to watch kids play and remind myself why we do this on a daily basis. So again, thank you, Mr. Cole, for those comments. We really do appreciate it. Anybody else for the good of the order before we start thinking about wrapping things up today?
I do have one more question. Sorry. Third time.
Good.
I know you mentioned we're going to divide this board after a certain time between the 1A, 2A, and the 3A, 4A, 5A. That will be after all the timelines, procedures are done. So it won't be there won't be anything new added afterwards. The 3A, 4A, 5A will meet just to discuss what schools will be placed under whatever system we've decided on.
100% correct as usual, Mr. Larson. Yeah, we want to make sure everybody's involved in the rule creation process that we're going to live by. But when we get to those hearing of the appeals, this was something that Mr. Larson, you experienced the last time around too, through some of this as you watched and followed and came a little bit closer to the process as well. We were having some 5A, 4A appeals literally being decided by the 1A, 2A people's votes. And it just didn't feel right that they didn't have a whole lot of skin in the game to be deciding. Conversely, if we had a 1A or 2A, we had some 5A people making the decision on things that they weren't even going to get close to. We want those decisions to be made by the people it's going to affect the most. To me and to our staff, that's really the fairest way to do it. But we want everybody involved in the whole process because we don't want, for instance, Mr. Larson, I know part of the reason you're probably asking this question is for somebody to form a policy for the 3A when you're not in the room to have a say in the discussion. And that makes 100% sense. Anything else from our group?
Hey, Bob Levitt, 4A, 5A North. Just with respect to the policies, procedures, and guidelines, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just thinking that those have been very, very specific in the past so that our agendas resulted in meetings where we were specifically, or the committee was specifically focused on fall sports, for instance. But we're already hearing things, and I'm thinking about Tony and his mention of baseball, and we're already hearing talk out there with respect to the model that was put in place for football being applied to other sports. But if we're limited in having conversations about, wow, this would work for baseball as well, when we're focusing on fall sports and we can't have that discussion, is that something we need to make sure is in our policies, procedures, and timelines so that we can say this could apply to baseball too, and decisions for those kinds of structures can be decided, dare I say, rather than sport by sport, but more globally across other sports, if that makes sense?
It actually does, Commissioner Levitt. Thank you for bringing that up. Ideally, what we want are the rules that we're going to play by across the board being formed within our timeline policies and procedures so that we're not making changes to accommodate certain areas later on. That's why we want to hear all those ideas real early in the process. Now, how that gets formed within a policies and procedures really depends on what the idea is, obviously, because we don't know what we're operating with until we know what we're operating with. And as confusing as that may sound, Yeah, upfront is where we need to see that. That's why we need to talk with as many people as we can as early in this process to make those determinations. One little surprise I haven't told you yet is that this committee will also, once we get teams placed or schools placed into classifications, once we hear appeals from those schools, you'll also serve as the tournament format committee. It's not as taxing as it sounds, but it is one more thing at the end where you'll propose a tournament format to the board as well. That's all part of the realignment process and part of the procedures that we'll go through. But yes, Commissioner Levitt, thank you for that question. And if a sport wants to go differently than what it is now, we need to know before we get there, for sure. And as early in the process, because if baseball wants to do something, then soccer might want to do it. Well, we're already past the soccer where we've aligned all the soccer teams. Now it's too late. We need to know up front what we're going to do, if that makes sense to everyone. Commissioner Levitt, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else from our group?
Hey, this is Paul Sullivan, Friendly High School 3A.
Hey, Mr.
Hey, just
Sullivan.
a quick reference to the letter that we shared in open public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Does that have to be officially requested to be submitted into the notes?
Mr. Anderson, what can I talk about in public that was brought up in public comment?
You can talk about that. Are you talking about the individual who gave the comment?
Yes.
Okay. That's part of the record, and this meeting's being recorded.
Yeah.
So that would go into, that's part of this record, and it would become a part of the minutes of this meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you both to Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Anderson. One more call. Anybody else with questions or comments? Okay, we're past an hour here, closing in on an hour and 15 minutes, and I tried to promise everybody we weren't going to take forever today. So I don't see any other questions. Again, if you don't want to ask in front of the group, feel free to give any one of us on staff a quick call or an email or whatever, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So we'll close item number 9, move on to item 10, which is public comment again. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Do we have any live public comment in our NIAA office or anywhere in our other locations statewide today?
There is none at the NIAA office.
Thank you, Ms. Lutz. I don't see anybody speaking up, raising hands, or unmuting, so I'm going to assume we don't have any public comment at this time. Our next meeting, it's in 2 weeks. I may have told a couple of you a wrong date. The correct date is March 21. That's 2 weeks from today, 1:30 p.m. We'll go virtual again. We'll send out a Zoom link. We'll send out an agenda for you. We'll have a packet for you too with some of the information in it, perhaps some of today's information too, so we remember what we're operating under. But again, March 21, 1:30 p.m., virtual meeting. You'll all get the link. I will tell you in these virtual meetings as well, if for some reason you can't make it, please let us know in advance. And as Mr. Anderson said, the meetings are being recorded as well. So don't want to get too far off topic on the agenda. So if we don't have anything else from our group, we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting at 2:41 p.m. on March the 7th. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your commitment today and all through this process. You're a big